It was just past 9 a.m. when Leonard James stepped through the glass doors of Pine Grove National Bank, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit and a calm confidence that came from years of hard-earned experience. The bank lobby was quiet, polished, sterile, the soft chime of corporate music playing in the background. A few early customers waited in line. Two tellers stood behind the counter, their expressions neutral until Leonard approached. He smiled politely and gave a slight nod. "Good morning." The younger teller, a woman in her late 20s with meticulously curled blonde hair and a name tag that read Melissa, barely glanced up from her screen. "We're currently helping clients with appointments first." "You'll have to wait," she said flatly, without asking his name or purpose. Leonard remained composed. "That's fine. I believe I'm on the schedule." Leonard James Melissa blinked, then scoffed almost imperceptibly. "Mr. James, are you here to open a checking account or apply for a loan?" He raised an eyebrow. "No, I'm meeting with the board." That got her attention. Her tone shifted, not quite hostile, but coated in disbelief. "Sir, we don't allow solicitors or outside vendors to just walk in and ask for meetings." Another customer, a middle-aged white man, turned slightly to watch the exchange. The air grew heavier. "I'm not a vendor," Leonard said patiently, pulling a slim leather folder from his briefcase. "I'm here for the 9:15 board meeting." Fourth floor Melissa frowned, trying to mask her surprise with authority. "We don't let visitors into staff areas without confirmation. You'll need to wait here until someone comes down." Leonard's lips twitched, not in amusement, but in restraint. He had expected this, had experienced this, again and again. "I understand," he said coolly, and took a seat on one of the stiff leather lobby chairs, folding his hands over his knee. Minutes passed. Another teller whispered something to Melissa. A man in a suit came down the elevator, glanced across the room, then froze. His expression shifted instantly, recognition, embarrassment, and alarm flashing across his face. He strode toward Leonard with urgency. "Mr. James, I'm so sorry for the delay," he said, offering a hand. "The board is already seated upstairs. We're ready when you are." Melissa's eyes widened. Leonard stood slowly, smoothed his jacket, and then turned to Melissa, not with anger, but with clarity. "Next time," he said gently, "ask why someone's here before you assume who they are." He walked past her without waiting for a reply, leaving her frozen, the flush of realization spreading across her cheeks. Upstairs, the bank's boardroom waited. So did a seat, his seat, at the head of the table. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime as Leonard James and the sharply dressed man from the board, Daniel Harper, the outgoing director, ascended in silence. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, glancing sideways. "I didn't realize they didn't know who you were downstairs," he offered, trying to laugh it off. Leonard didn't smile. "It happens more than you'd think," he said quietly, his voice calm but edged with truth. "Especially when you look like me." Daniel had no response. The elevator opened to the executive floor, a world apart from the marble and glass lobby below. Plush carpet, framed awards, a wall of tall windows overlooking the skyline, and at the end of the hallway, the boardroom. Inside, a long mahogany table sat surrounded by well-dressed board members, mostly older, mostly white. The energy in the room was expectant. They had been told this was the day. A new chapter, a new leader, but none of them had actually met him yet. Until now. The room quieted as Leonard entered. Conversations halted mid-sentence. A few eyes widened slightly, not with hostility, but with surprise. Daniel cleared his throat. "The ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice formal now, "allow me to introduce Mr. Leonard James, our new director of Pine Grove National Bank." Silence. Then a wave of polite applause, a few nods, a few genuine smiles. Leonard stepped forward with graceful confidence, shaking hands, meeting eyes. He'd learned long ago how to read a room, how to carry himself in a way that couldn't be ignored. Not with aggression, not with apology, with presence. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice rich and controlled. "It's an honor to be here. I'm not here to simply sit at the head of this table. I'm here to bring change, not just in policy, but in culture." That line landed. Some leaned forward, Others stiffened ever so slightly. I believe in performance, Leonard continued, but I also believe in people. And we can't grow this institution if we don't first acknowledge how often we shrink others without even realizing it. No one spoke. They knew exactly what and who he was referring to. And Leonard let the silence do the work. He didn't need to name names. The lobby encounter already cast a long shadow. I'm not here to fire anyone, he added, but I am here to challenge everyone, starting today. And just like that, he sat down at the head of the table, no longer just a visitor, no longer just a man waiting to be acknowledged. He was the one everyone had been waiting for, and they hadn't even known it. Downstairs, Melissa couldn't focus. She kept glancing at the elevator, her posture tense, fingers fumbling on the keyboard as she tried to finish the transaction for the next customer. But her mind was back on the man she had dismissed, the man who had walked in quietly and turned out to be the new director of the entire bank. Her stomach churned. She thought about the way she had spoken to him, the assumptions laced in her tone, the doubt in her eyes, the invisible wall she had placed between them without even realizing how high it stood. But now it was unmistakable. She hadn't just turned away a customer. She had dismissed the future boss. In the break room, whispers were already starting. A fellow teller pulled up her phone, showing Melissa an email from corporate. The official announcement had gone out. Leonard James appointed as director of Pine Grove National Bank. His face, poised and powerful, was right there at the top of the screen. I thought you were the one who talked to him when he first came in, her coworker asked, not unkindly, but with curiosity that bordered on concern. Melissa nodded, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know. Her coworker tilted her head. Didn't know or didn't look? The words stung. She excused herself to the restroom, locking the stall door behind her. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long time, her face pale, her thoughts racing. All her training, all her customer service scripts, all the seminars on bias and inclusion. And still, she had failed the most basic test of all, respect. Not because he looked important, but because he was a person. And deep down, she knew. If he hadn't been named director, she probably wouldn't have thought twice about it. That truth sat heavy in her chest. Melissa wasn't a villain. But today, she had been a reflection of a system, one that judged quietly, instantly, and without permission. And now, she had a choice. Ignore it, or learn from it. She took a deep breath, adjusted her blouse, and returned to her desk. Not with comfort, but with the beginning of awareness. Because soon, she'd have to face Leonard James again. And this time, she needed to do more than just apologize. She needed to listen. The following Monday brought a quiet buzz of anxiety through Pine Grove National Bank. It was Leonard James's first official day in his new role as director. And though the press release had gone out and the congratulatory emails had circulated, the staff on the lower floors still didn't quite know what to expect. Some whispered that he might clean house. Others feared he'd carry resentment from what had happened in the lobby. Leonard, however, arrived just before 8 a.m., as he always did, punctual, calm, and intentional. He took the elevator to the executive floor, set his briefcase down, and then did something unexpected. He went back downstairs, without an assistant, without announcement. Just Leonard, in a navy suit and a subtle tie, walking through the rows of tellers and desks with quiet observation. Employees straightened in their chairs. Some offered nervous greetings. Others avoided eye contact. And then he stopped at Melissa's window. She looked up and froze, caught mid-typing. Their eyes met. Good morning, Leonard said, his tone even. Good morning, Director James, she replied, her voice almost cracking. He said nothing at first, just looked around the desk, tidy, efficient. Then he glanced back at her. You've been here how long, Melissa? Almost 3 years, sir. He nodded. You're fast. You handled the line well on Friday. I noticed Melissa blinked. That wasn't what she expected. Thank you. I wanted to say I'm sorry, she blurted, her words rushing, for how I treated you last week. It wasn't professional. It wasn't right. Leonard studied her. Not unkindly, but without softening the moment. I don't need an apology for me, he said, but I hope you're reflecting on who else might have been treated the same, without a title to shield them. Melissa's eyes fell. That truth hurt more than a reprimand. I am, she whispered. I promise I am. Leonard gave a single nod. Not to dismiss, but to acknowledge the moment. We don't grow by pretending it didn't happen, he said. We grow by owning it, and then doing better, every day. With that, he turned and walked away, heading to the staff lounge to introduce himself to the rest of the team. Melissa sat in silence, not ashamed, just changed. By the end of the week, Leonard James had become more than just a name on a door. He was everywhere, walking through departments, sitting in on meetings, introducing himself to everyone from senior loan officers to the janitorial staff. He didn't talk about metrics or profit margins. Not yet. He talked about culture, and people listened. Because Leonard didn't lead from above, he led among. One afternoon, he asked to sit in on the teller team's shift transition. Normally, that meeting was quick, often overlooked, a rundown of balances, station checks, and shift reminders. But this time, it started with Leonard sitting in the circle beside them. Melissa was there. So were three other tellers and their floor manager. Leonard leaned forward, hands clasped loosely. Tell me, what do customers notice first when they walk through the doors? Silence. Then someone said, the branding? Maybe the line? Leonard nodded. Sure, but what about the part they feel first? A pause. Melissa hesitated, then spoke. The way they're greeted. Or, not greeted, Leonard smiled faintly. Exactly. He looked around the group. I wasn't mistaken for the director last week. I was mistaken for someone who didn't matter. And that feeling, it stays with people? He wasn't angry. He wasn't making anyone squirm. He was making them think. I'm not here to shame anyone, he continued. I'm here to help us reset the way we see people. Not just based on suits or skin, or whether someone looks like they belong. The room was quiet. Then, slowly, heads nodded. Melissa spoke again, more sure this time. We've been trained to spot red flags, but sometimes we forget the cost of false alarms. Leonard looked at her, and this time his smile reached his eyes. Well said. That moment broke something open. Not tension, but growth. The meeting ended with real conversation. Not the kind scribbled into a training manual, but honest questions, personal stories, even a few tears. It wasn't about Leonard being in the room. It was about what he brought into it. Permission to face uncomfortable truths and the courage to change. It was a Friday morning when the change became visible. A mother with 2 kids entered the lobby, clearly overwhelmed. Her toddler tugged at her dress while the baby fussed in her arms. Her clothes were worn, her posture tense, and her eyes darted around the room, searching for help. Before, she might have been met with impatience. Today, Melissa stood up immediately from her station and approached the woman with a kind smile. Hi there, she said warmly. Why don't you take a seat for a moment? I'll bring everything you need to you. The mother blinked, surprised, then relieved. A small gesture, but it echoed loud. Leonard watched from the second floor, arms crossed, unnoticed. He didn't need to step in. The change was already taking root. Later that afternoon, Leonard held his first all-staff town hall, the first one in years, where every department was invited, not just upper management. The meeting was in the main conference space, with chairs packed to the walls. He began without slides or charts, just words. When I walked into this bank last week, I didn't see bad people, Leonard said, scanning the room. I saw good people in a broken pattern. He let the silence stretch. A pattern that decides who gets respect based on what they look like. A pattern that confuses confidence with credentials and assumptions with policy. Some staff shifted in their seats. Others leaned in. I'm not here to just increase profits. I'm here to raise standards of human dignity, because a customer should never have to wear a suit to be taken seriously, and neither should any of you. There was a murmur of agreement. Leonard continued, I've seen how high people will rise when someone stops holding them down. So that's what we'll do. We'll build a place where no one's humanity is checked at the door. Applause followed, hesitant at first, then stronger, spreading through the room. Not performative, not polite, real. Melissa clapped too, not because she had to, but because she believed him now. Because she'd felt the change in herself, in others. Leonard didn't stand there looking for validation. He was already turning the page. But the bank? It had just begun writing a new chapter. 2 months later, Pine Grove National Bank felt like a different place. Not because the walls were repainted or because new policies had been slapped on a company memo. The change was quieter, deeper. It showed up in how people greeted one another, in who got asked for input during meetings, in who was given a chance to rise. And on a crisp Thursday morning, that change came into full view. The bank was hosting its quarterly community partnership breakfast, where local business owners, nonprofit leaders, and city officials gathered to hear updates and discuss new initiatives. In the past, the event was stiff and performative, name tags, stale pastries, and rehearsed smiles. But this time, it felt different. There was laughter, real conversations, and at the front of the room, a podium adorned with a simple sign: Rebuilding Trust, one person at a time. Leonard James stood behind that podium, dressed not to impress but to connect. A soft gray blazer, no tie, sleeves rolled just enough to suggest he came to work, not just talk. He began his speech. I walked into this bank not as a director, but as a stranger. And that first day, I was told to wait. But here's what I know. Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest invitation to lead. Not out of anger, but out of vision. The audience was still. He looked toward the back of the room, where Melissa stood beside the teller team, now proudly part of the event coordination. Their eyes met. She smiled. Not in apology, in solidarity. Leonard continued, We're not perfect, but we're progressing. We've learned that equity isn't a policy, it's a practice. That dignity isn't given, it's recognized. And that leadership, true leadership, is when you stop asking, who's in the room? And start asking, who's still waiting outside? The crowd erupted in applause. This time not out of politeness, but from something they felt in their chest. Afterward, local leaders lined up to speak with Leonard. A young black entrepreneur asked how to start a business account. A high school senior requested an internship. Melissa quietly handed the student an application. Because now, she wasn't just doing her job. She was part of a mission. And Leonard? He looked around the lobby, on once a space of judgment, now one of welcome. Now, he didn't need to say a word. The story had already been told, by actions, by change, by a man who had once been mistaken for less, and rose to become so much more than a title.